One of the problems with palladium and trying to predict the price movement in palladium in the short term is the lack of news information out there, and also the big wild card, which is the Russian stockpiles. This was an article from November 7th, 2011. I remember seeing this article. I just want to point out, I'll provide the link if you want to read it, but it's stating that Russia, the largest producer of palladium, which they produce about 43% of the world's supply, has been selling off their Russian reserves, right, that they have on their Norilsk mine, mainly the Norilsk mine in northern Siberia, which was built over in the Soviet era into the global market. So they didn't have they used to stockpile palladium before there became the widespread use in the catalytic converters in the 1980s for emissions purposes. So they just used to stockpile it when they produced the nickel and just kept it on the side. The amount of reserves for palladium, which is like platinum, is a state secret, and its sales have been a wild card for palladium investors. That's true, but you see, this is something I want to point out. Now, not to say that these people are being inaccurate; they're going by what they were told. But it was, I'd assume the Russians were playing some games with the market. This is why this metal's a tough one to trade, but probably a good one to hold. But late last month, an unnamed official in the Ministry of Finance told Russian business news agency Prime Tass that stockpiles at the state-run precious metals repository were becoming depleted, making 2011 the last Russia makes any substantial deliveries from the stockpile. They said this before. They said this a year ago. They said similar story, and everybody hangs on every word they say. But I'm gonna point out something. Remember, the story is November 7th. They're talking about, they're basically hinting, not that the article is being wrong, but they're getting it from Russian leaders, whatever it is, that palladium stockpiles are pretty much done with and they're not releasing anymore. Remember the date, November 7th. Look over here. This is November 7th, right? Palladium went up, and then it took this big nosedive in November. And you know what happened here? About a couple weeks after that story broke, Russia released a mega amount of palladium on the market, a whole pile. Even though palladium had a record amount of usage and things like that, they released a whole pile of it on the market. So sometimes it's very difficult when you're reading a news story, not to criticize the accuracy of this, but somebody behind the scenes was telling these people this stuff, and it makes you think it's going to go up. It went down. And this is one reason I'd be very nervous about trying to play leverage on this metal. You got very sketchy information. Now, I want to see this chart. This is a monthly chart. Now, back in 2001, early 2001, palladium reached a high of, I think it was like 1085, around there. And I want to call some attention to this. These are like three ratios. I would not pay so much attention to the yellow line. That is the platinum-palladium ratio. Essentially, it should be about 1-to-1. And it was about 1-to-1 back in 2000, 2001. They were both about the same price. Because they're about the same rarity. And actually, palladium is more rare than platinum and more heavily used. And so much for the fundamentals. It's doesn't make any sense. And that's one reason I bought more of this metal versus gold. And I'm holding on to it. I'm just going to hold on to it. But this pink line here represents the palladium gold ratio. So you could see that it actually went 4-to-1 back in early 2001. Palladium was 4 times the price of gold. Now, people are getting all excited about gold going up. It's going to go up to the moon. Well, palladium should be worth more than gold, fundamentally. For the same reasons that silver is used widely, in industry, and you say silver's a better bet than gold. Well, palladium is more widely used in industry than silver. It's the big problem is with it. It's a relatively new metal as far as it being discovered. It was discovered in the 1800s, and it was named after an asteroid that was discovered around in a planet or something, or an asteroid. I think it was Palos, after the Greek god Palos, which is for wisdom. So they just threw the name Palladium on it. That's really where the name came from. Kind of like they just made a name up, but not important. But what I think is important, though, I think this metal fundamentally has a lot more potential to run upward. And I don't have the chart on here, but I did look up and research back in 1979 when silver went up astronomically, about 6 times in a year. Platinum and palladium did the same thing. Both did the same thing. They went up. I think they performed a little bit better. There's a little bit of tunnel vision only on silver, and I know the big advantage of silver is that people can recognize it as money. It's actually been in our coinage before. That's a big thing. That's a very big thing. But one thing I want to get at is this. If we're looking at how many ounces of palladium are demand, demand went up. And I have some sketchy numbers on it. This stuff was kind of hard to find, some information. And I found some conflicting information. But say close to 9 million ounces is used every year globally. And it's going to go up a little bit because you could see, automotive, the catalytic in cars, 65%. But hybrid cars use 30% more each car for hybrids. So that's something coming on new. And then they got new legislation with off-road vehicles that are going to use palladium because they're going to require catalyst on off-road machinery, farm machinery, and stuff like that. There's a lot of pending legislation. But that's going to put a bite into this. And then industrial. They use this a lot, industrial, in, it could also be for even dental work. It could also be photography, because photography with palladium or even platinum, it has that's for like extremely long, and you have an intention of keeping photos extremely long, like for historical archive purposes. They'll use palladium in the printout of the photograph. Industrial use, a lot of times it's used for like plating electrodes, because palladium can be beaten into a sheet as thin as gold, just like gold. It can be put on ultra thin. And also it doesn't oxidize in normal room temperature and stuff like that. And now there's another usage. I'm going to probably throw another one because I kind of studied this metal quite a bit. Another usage, I think, where palladium's going to get used like a real lot, because I think the energy of the future is going to be hydrogen. And palladium has these unique properties, like a sponge. It absorbs 900 times its volume in hydrogen at room temperature. So they use this in the hydrogen fuel cells, and they also use it for purifying hydrogen. Hydrogen is a super, super clean fuel, and it probably is going to be the fuel of the future. So that's going to put a lot of demand on palladium right there. Now, if you look at this figure, total demand, let's say 9 million ounces. Say I didn't have what the ETF investment was. It had it like they took some of it out. But it's a very, very, like, notice coins isn't even on here, or ETFs isn't even on here. It's such a small amount that it's like nothing. It's like, I don't know, maybe these numbers are off a little bit, but these are the best numbers I found. Maybe it's like 1 or 2% for all the coins and ETFs. I don't even think it's that much. But look at like what silver has. Silver coins, it's about 10%. ETFs supposedly about 17% with the bullion dealers and ETFs, 17%. So you got about 1/4 of it is for investment purposes. Hardly anybody's investing in palladium, and they're missing the boat. Now, the other thing is, say you're not even including ETFs, you got coins, 100 million ounces, say that's 101 million ounces in 2010. 2011 was higher, but say 2010. Say it was $30, an ounce or whatever. Just make up a number and say that's 2011. So you have $3 billion, right, invested in coins, say roughly, right? If you did that with Palladium, you would take up like a large slice, probably more than, it would take up a large slice of this market, because say 1,000,000 ounces of palladium is going to cost less than $1 billion, right? And you're talking that is about 10, that's more than 10% of the market. What would that do? I mean, a few $1 billion invested into this would take up a large slice of this market, right? So that's the one thing I always said, if people were buying an ounce of palladium once in a while versus 20 ounces of silver, this market would go ballistic. The little investor does have the potential to move this market very hard and upwards. And fundamentally, this metal is far more rare than gold. Now you look at the industrial usage, it's 95%. 95%. Industrial and automotive, consider that's industrial. It's essential. Everybody drives a car, and automotive production's going up globally in China, India, Brazil. So you got 95% approximately going into industrial, compared with silver, you got about less than half going into industrial. So it's got a lot more going for it in a lot of other ways, except for the fact it doesn't have this, centuries long, monetary usage like silver does. But in the new ages that we're in, palladium, I think, is going to be the most valuable metal around, except for some really exotic things. I mean, I think palladium is going to far exceed gold and platinum. So I think it's a smart investment. Nobody's doing it, and you know what? It's not nobody, but you know what? Usually the majority has it wrong. That's almost always the case. They jump on it later on, and that's when they get slaughtered, right? In the case over here, this palladium was $114 an ounce, and it went up to like $1,100, almost $1,100 an ounce inside of, just 4 years approximately, and then it crashed right back down. You could say fundamentally that's a terrible metal, but I would imagine it's going to do the same type of things again, but it may be going up to some astronomical value, like if say gold is going to $5,000-$6,000 an ounce, maybe palladium will be $8,000 an ounce, and then maybe it'll crash back down to $2,000. I mean, no matter how you look at it, today it may pull back more. I'm not sure what the hell it's going to do, to tell you the truth. I am very much confused about the price movements of this metal, because fundamentally it should be worth a hell of a lot more than gold, but it could pull back a little more. If there's a financial problem coming on with Europe or something. But since it pulled back some, I rebought my position in it, and I'm not buying on leverage. I'm just leaving it as regular ETF. Follows the price of the underlying asset, physical electronic funds, and I think we're eventually going to see this stuff be worth a hell of a lot more than gold. Now, it is a scary metal to jump into because it's very erratic. I could tell you that. I think that's one problem with it. It's more erratic than silver. More erratic. So, if you actually get this metal, be prepared to hold on to it for a long period of time. But a long period of time might just be a few years. And also remember that back in 1979, 80, whatever it was, that like the very beginning of 80, silver had the that extreme height of $50 an ounce. Palladium and platinum were actually performing extremely well in the same percentage types of gains approximately as silver. So you really, I think, if whatever's going to happen with silver, you're going to do fine with palladium. And if there's any kind of problem where there's supply is cut off from Russia because Russia decides to keep the stuff for themselves, well, I think it's going to go ballistic. And where it went to this level, this was 4 times the price of gold. So, if gold's supposed to be going in these crazy numbers, like, I'm hearing $8,000 an ounce, $10,000 an ounce. I think Mike Maloney said $20,000 an ounce. Well, palladium should be more than gold. So, just think about it. I mean, if you're hanging on to a metal for the long haul, this is the one to hold on to.